Okay, we're just about to start again with the questions. I just have one announcement I've been asked to make. You've probably seen the leaflet around on the chairs. It's for a talk that's happening on the 30th of August from 2 to 4 at St Andrew's Greek Orthodox Church Hall in Gladesville, 20 Wharf Road. It's Our Water Supplies Are Too Precious to Risk, with a special guest, Julie Shepherd of Rivers SOS. So anyone who can go, I'm sure they'd love you to turn up. Now, we're ready to ask the questions. Okay.
You're not really mentioning one of the key elements of mining, and that is that its economic benefits are virtually nil as far as employment goes. And that's, I think one or two of you might have touched on that. The second thing I want to ask you about is Metgasco. What's happening there? You mentioned something in the northeast that they had their license stopped or whatever it was. You want to carry on with that? Thank you.
Yeah, certainly the claims of the industry about how many people they're going to employ and the flow-ons are always inflated. The Australian Institute's done some really good research into sort of balancing the ledger there in terms of what they say they're going, how many people they're going to employ, the flow-ons, but also in terms of what the impact of exporting does in terms of inflating the currency and then therefore killing jobs in other sectors of the economy, so tourism, services, education, all those types of things. We haven't done the economic analysis of what becoming the world's largest exporter of LNG, you know, iron ore, coking coal, bauxite, blah, 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 all the things that we're exporting actually means. I think Paddy will probably expand on that. In terms of Metgasco, what's happening there is that they're a little company. They're pretty stubborn. There's an enormous community opposition there. It's just overwhelming. So 90% of the people of Lismore, a broad constituency, cattle farmers, dairy farmers, macadamia farmers, some quite big industries up there. Norco, the dairy cooperative, tourism, are all saying no, and you know the hippies and the people in the the middle class and the battlers and the hairdressers and the mechanics and the plumbers, everyone's there. It's all of the people there. I don't think that's Sesame Street song, but anyway, they're all there, and they're all there. And Metgasco have they've gone to court. They're contesting the validity of how the government came to suspend their approval to drill. So they've gone to the court contesting that, saying that it wasn't that the government didn't have valid reasons. Even if they beat the government there in the court, which they may, I'm not sure. Even if they win that, when they go back, the community, it's just a cause célèbre up there. It's just like everyone's into it. They'll have a total opposition. So that company's just ruined. Basically, they need to go and get into wind farms or dairying or something, because they won't be able to move up in the northern rivers. That's not there's great opposition to that there. It's the Pilliga and Gloucester, where you're in small communities and it's happening on Crown land and other areas where it's more difficult to fight these industries.
All right, hang on. Okay. Question to either of you. Thanks very much. Great presentation by both of you. My name's Wynne. Has there been any published results of the monitoring of the effect of the methane gas going into the atmosphere? What do we know about whether the actual pollutants in the atmosphere, greenhouse gas or methane, has that work been done?
Well, can I? Sorry.
Yeah.
And. Something that I've been dying to know for years but never got to answer really in the book. Because, you know, the US says that its emissions are falling, and I mean, I think that's, you know, the UN agrees, and NOAA that, you know, US emissions are falling now as a result of shale. I would like to know whether that's a calculation, an estimate, or whether that's an actual measurement. And one day I will find out and write a story about it, but I don't know the answer. I know that in Australia there was a concern that the Greens took up federally about the assumptions that were being made, you know, on a sort of per well basis about emissions, leaking, and that was not a real world measurement at all. There was no measurement going on, and that was part of the problem. And I'm saying this having written the book, you know, a year and a half ago. So, and to be honest, I'm not sure, but Jeremy might know, but, you know, more recently, whether there's been an update to that methodology and whether actually there is being. But anyway, whatever. Even if there has been an update, they're going to trash it. You know, at a federal level, I would wager, but.
Yeah, there is a paucity of information. In Colorado, they're doing a lot of studies now, and they are showing spikes in methane. That they really are, the Americans are getting very serious. NASA have got a bit of a study going on into the Arctic, the permafrost melting and releasing the methane, and they're also studying where in the United States there are spikes in methane. I think it was an article in Nature, published something from one of the universities from Colorado saying on the eastern side of the Rockies there was this methane spike, and it was also that they said there was a sort of associated with the gas fields. But the short answer is, here in Australia, no, they haven't done the studies. Southern Cross Uni are doing it, but you can tell the sensitivity of the industry, because whenever anyone says anything like that, it just gets hammered and hammered and hammered and hammered by the industry and the pro people in the government. I think that the body that was tasked with doing it, I think it's called Jazeera. Is it called Jazeera, Kate? Can you remember? Yeah, it's called Jazeera, and it was CSIRO in collaboration with the gas industry, and so as it was funded by the gas industry, they've been tasked for developing the methodology, but they're in no hurry. This is the thing. For something that's happening today, they're not in a hurry to find out, because up until 2 o'clock, there was a liability in terms of greenhouse gas and carbon tax, and also, you know, the pollution of the atmosphere. So they have to pay, or did have to pay, for the pollution or stop it, and that would be very difficult for them to do.
Thank you.
Yeah, g'day, Brian from Cannon. I have 2 questions I'd like to know your thoughts on. The first, hydraulic fracking being cause of earthquakes. In Ohio, they never used to have a problem with earthquakes, but since thousands of wells have been put in place, they're getting earthquakes all the time now. It seems to be a strong support that it's causing them. And other questions, Tony Abbott's Trans-Pacific Partnership, TPP. You said 10 wells have been approved in New South Wales out of thousands. If the TPP is put in place, all those wells that have been knocked back, the multinationals and corporations, will they be able to sue for loss of profits?
I could have a little crack at the fracking one. My understanding is that the triggering sort of seismicity is more likely in the re-injection of produced water, which is what happens typically with shale wells. So they have higher quantity of water and they pump it back down underground, and it's that process that is most likely to trigger an earthquake. And yeah, you have had earthquakes, incidents increasing in the US, and also there was an Australian company, Quadrilla, that had got into trouble in the UK with a well, but no problems here. I mean, obviously we're a pretty geologically stable country, but also you don't have the re-injection to the same. With coal seam gas wells, you're just taking the water out and then they're disposing of it, so they're not re-injecting as often. And as to the TPP, I've got no idea about that, but I don't know.
Yeah, I'll start at I don't know about the TPP. Look, I honestly don't. I haven't I've been keeping up with it, to be honest. I just don't know what's happening with the TPP, and I know that some of my colleagues, my federal colleagues, are concerned. Scott Ludlam and Peter Wish-Wilson but I'm just not across it. So I'm sure that their website, I know Peter Wilson's been raising questions in the Senate, but I'm not sure what they are, and I'm not across what's being proposed, so I probably should be, by the sounds of it. In terms of the seismic activity, look, yeah, absolutely, that is an issue. As Paddy said, it's with re-injection, but you never know. No one knows. You know, there are unknown unknowns, and that's very true when it comes to geology and hydrogeology. One of the places I did go and have a look at, where they've had a bit of seismic activity because of gas drilling, was a place called Sujaro. It's where Santos were in a joint venture with a company called Lapindo Brantas in Eastern Java. It's a company owned by one of the big politicians over there, one of the guys that was running for the presidency there. And Santos drilled for conventional gas not too far away from a couple of really massive volcanoes. Happened to just pop into one of the side vents of the volcanoes, and they've now created the largest ecological catastrophe in Southeast Asia. It's a mud volcano now, which is now the largest on Earth. It's covering about 13 square kilometres. It's about 200 metres high. It's spewing 30 million tonnes of...
Still going.
They're still going. It's been going since 2006. I went and visited it. It's displaced 130,000 people. It's equivalent of happening in Campbelltown. And it's like cut the freeway, cut the main gas line, ironically, cut the main rail line. It's consumed like 6 mosques. And it's just growing and growing and growing because they drilled down. They were drilling down. They fracked, get into this gas reservoir, and then all around the mud started to bubble up and the ground went down, and the volcano is now so big that it's falling down on itself, and that pressure is making it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's happening in like one of the largest cities on Earth. So it can go very bad, and there's nothing they can do about it. And the government just said it was caused by an earthquake, so therefore it was an act of God, as it were, under their regulations, and so they don't have to do anything about it. And so everyone just walked away, including Santos. This was an Australian company. This was the people who were running the drilling was Santos, in an area where Shell in the 1950s said, "You'd be mad. There's a big volcano. That big hill there is a volcano. It's a bad place to drill for gas. You've got to be really mindful." And Santos went, "Nah, let's have a crack." And it's still bubbling away. So it can go wrong.
Firstly, I'd like to make a comment for everyone. If you want a good summary of the incident with fracking, get yourself a copy of the magazine News International edition 468, which is a summary pretty much of what's happening here and around the world regarding fracking. Now, a couple of questions, so I hope you guys are destroying. I'm just going to ask them real brief. We only own 30 centimetres of the surface of the land. Have there been any changes to the ownership of land below the area that everyone sort of resides, including places like, say, St. Peter's or Camden? Secondly, in the US, there was a law that was called the Cheney loophole, or nicknamed Cheney loophole, which is based on getting the companies to actually water down their obligations to water, land, and environmental obligations before they start drilling. Have we done the same thing, or are our laws a lot more stringent than what the Americans are? Thirdly, with chemicals, most of the chemicals that are used, at least over 530 chemicals are being used for hydraulic fracking, for example. More than 60 to 70% of all the chemicals are actually classed under, they're hidden under the so-called term chemical proprietorship. So are there any, are you guys aware of any laws regarding how can those secrecy loopholes be sort of reneged or forced to sort of be changed? Which is actually related to the TPP that you're referring to, which is still under review, but it's actually going to be done through the back door, not the front door, so that's why no one knows about it. Fourthly, regarding penalties, the biggest fine so far is $1,500, mainly because they found uranium in the spent water coming from one of the mines in Queensland and New South Wales. My question is, would increasing the fines, whether it's financial, such as say multi-million-dollar fines, jail time for the leaders or the managers or greater, help to sort of change the way they do business? And fifth, and final point is, if we were to put coal seam gas fields right in the underneath the Liberal MPs in Canberra, for example, will that actually have an influence on the way they do business? Thank you.
I don't think there's no coal in Canberra, so I don't think. I forgot number one. I got 2 to 5.
The ownership of the land.
Oh, the ownership of the land. No, I don't think that's changed. And I don't think that's. I haven't got a clear picture. Of my understanding is in Texas. That's why farmers have made more money out of it because they've got rights over the land to the centre of the earth, or they've got rights to the resources, and they've got an ability to negotiate. I think Ian McFarlane just recently flagged that this was the solution for New South Wales, and he's been keen to for Queensland is to make sure that farmers get a better recompense for the loss of value to their property or the loss of amenity from having the gas on it. Basically, if you just pay more money, they'll get more access. Companies like Santos, to their credit, have in New South Wales and Queensland said that they will never go onto a farmer's land that doesn't want them. The net result of that is in New South Wales they haven't gone into anyone's land at all. Well, that's not true. That's being good, but they have really struggled to access farmers' property. And even though they would have the right, if they wanted to start taking farmers to court, they could no doubt get on the land. And they've been willing to pay. They put out a voluntary sort of regime and make decent offers to farmers for on a per well basis, probably higher than what the Queensland farmers were being offered. But it's not enough, because I think for a lot of the farmers it's not about the they're perfectly prepared to get arrested or go to jail if they have to, if it's because it's about their property, and their legacy, their inherit, their family property. So. And I'll just whack through the other ones that I understand. Cheney loophole, yes, that's what I was talking about before. I think it was 05. I think that really opened the floodgates for them. That's in Gaslands. Nick Nass, I don't know the answer to you about how the regime has changed, but I do know that certainly under Labor there was a review commissioned of what I was amazed to discover, that the regulatory body for safety of chemicals in Australia is basically a part-time person with a secretary sitting somewhere. And they do these rolling reviews. It's completely underfunded, and often, as the point you were making, they're happy to take some kind of second-hand certification from the US as being good enough. And then there's you obviously know more than me about the disclosure regime. So, but I have to say I haven't seen. Depends. I mean, I don't want to offend people up in Tara and so forth, because they are living very close to that's probably the most densely populated gas field in the country at this point. These rural residential blocks up in Queensland, the Western Downs, but the health impacts yet we haven't seen. There's concern. I know New South Wales Health was worried about the chemicals that were being used. The industry is worried and is trying to, soften the chemicals that they're using, or trial organic fracking fluids and so forth. But yeah, I don't think yet we've seen real, or certainly I'm not aware of, documented evidence of health impacts yet from the, toxicity of the frack fluids or the volatile gases that are escaping or anything like that. Penalties. I just can't comment. I just don't know if there's been any bigger penalties awarded, but Jeremy might. And the Liberal MPs, well, I'll let Jeremy comment on that much.
Okay. It'd be a disaster if we handed the mineral wealth and the gas and everything to individuals, because one, it would just be a free for all. It'd be Beverly Hillbillies type stuff. That's exactly what it would be. That's what's happened in the United States, where an industry comes in, and to get a foothold, they say, okay, we'll offer these people this percentage of the per well or per volumetric, this much per gas, and someone gets really rich, and the next person down the road doesn't get quite as rich, and the next person down the road doesn't get quite as rich, and then everyone else is just going, oh, well, we just want to get something, and then all the other people go, we live in a gas field, we just want to get out. And so that's how they use that, that they leverage the money to get in, and they do the same thing with the governments. But the industry itself doesn't want to do that because they recognise that the farmers and the landholders would be pretty tough negotiators and say, well, we want this much, and they don't want to start down that slope. At the moment, when I came in 2011, there was a 5-year royalty holiday in New South Wales to sort of facilitate the industry. So we were foregoing the vast majority of royalties that we made. It was a very small industry then, only generating a couple $100,000 in royalties from 100 wells, but it would the government wouldn't come at it because it would set the principle that people would apply to coal and gold and all the other bits and pieces in the ground. In terms of the loophole, well, yes, but in Australia we didn't even have the loop. You know, we just really don't have it. Most of the developments that have been knocked back recently have been knocked back straight, remarkably, on sort of economic grounds, on a failure. The most recent one, Warkworth, was just the judge in the Land Environment Court just said, you just made all this stuff up. Your economic modelling's flawed. But in terms of environmental elements, we don't see many things knocked back because our water laws and our air pollution laws are too tough. You know, all of the time you see conditions of consent put in place, and the company gets an approval, and the condition of consent is, because there's been concern raised about air pollution, is that they will develop a plan to deal with that pollution. So the plan that they're going to develop is how they deal with the issue. And then what they go and do is they start the development and they start polluting and they keep developing their plan. And their plan's ongoing, and they're working on their plan, and they're consulting with their plan, and they've got a plan, and their plan just comes out and it's really not going to deal with it at all. And that's the situation in New South Wales, where rather than cut green tape, as so many people are saying we should do, we really don't have proper green tape. RAND in the 70s really started the process, brought in a good act. And from then it's just been chewed to pieces, and the government with its new planning reforms it's just diabolical. It's just a free-for-all. In terms of the chemicals, well, the companies say, oh, they're all just household chemicals and all the rest of it. You're right, they're all proprietary chemicals, and there's all this, they're commercial in confidence, we can't tell you what's in them, and they all rely, as Paddy said, on sort of being accredited by an organisation that's sort of, it's very nebulous about who's actually doing it. A lot of it comes out of Canada, Alberta. I think there's an act in Alberta which they rely on. But I've seen some of the fracking chemicals, radioactive, a lot of things that you certainly wouldn't want in your bloodstream. In terms of fines, the largest I think was against Santos. The EPA took Santos to court over the Bill Windy pond spill, and they got I think a $52,000 fine. But I met with the EPA today and was about this issue, and I was saying, why do you not fine these people? If you want to be an exemplar organisation, you need to make an example of people. And they said, yeah, well, it's sort of tricky. We take these companies to court, and if we lose, the government gets upset with them. We've only got this much budget, da-da-da-da-da. And I'm going, well, that it should be on the merit, not on whether or not you've got enough money and the government's going to be upset. So I think that there should be much tougher fines. The government's recently said that they're going to increase the fine to $15,000 on the spot fine. For a company like AGL, I mean, some of these mining companies, that's a set of truck tyres, that's nothing. That's not even a speed bump. They just absolutely plough through that. They just put that into their balance sheet of things that they'll have to do, pay fines. Rather than pay for the waste, they just pay fines. In terms of politicians, well, I'm the only politician in New South Wales that's been to see a mature gas industry in the United States. I think I'm the only one in Australia who's actually been to see it in the United States. I went to Queensland a lot of times, but I know that Andrew Stoner said on ABC 7:30, I wouldn't want one on my boundary, I wouldn't want one affecting my property values. Certainly this is an industry that no one wants on their backyard. Interestingly, this has been, not many people remember this, the CSG issue didn't actually start in St Peter's, sort of bubble up in the public consciousness. It actually started, remarkably, in Chris Harcher's backyard. Chris Harcher, the disgraced former Resources Minister, he was neighbours with the other fellow who's in a bit of trouble, Mike Gallagher, the police minister, who's going to spend a bit of time down at Castlereagh Street in the next couple of weeks, talking about his mate Nathan Tinkler and others. They were the ones that first started a community organisation on the Central Coast in Wyong opposing Sydney Gas's plans for coal seam gas in Wyong. And there was a perceived conflict of interest that they were lobbying government over a development that was happening in their backyard. And then Chris Harcher gets into government. He gave lots of speeches about the dangers of coal seam gas, gets into government and it just flips over. And so it's incumbent on these politicians to be completely informed on what they are going to impose on our ecology and community. In terms of health, I think that is something that is developing rapidly. If you follow what's happening in the United States with the numbers of class actions and settlements, they are coming at a rate of knots. And in the United States, the way they deal with it is they just go, these people are suing, you just settle, and confidentiality, you shut up. And that's how they're dealing with it. And my friend John Fenton, who lives in Pavilion, Wyoming, he's had neighbours all around him, and they're suffering those health impacts. I don't think it's I think it's only a matter of time until we start to see that in a serious way in Queensland. Sorry.
No, I just wanted to add actually two things quickly. One is that we have got one of the oldest gas fields in the country here down at Camden, actually. AGL has been there for a long time, started in the 90s. No one ever noticed or bothered up until bang, the industry really started to expand about 5 years ago. I mean, there never has been a problem there, but they didn't drill much, and it was all very rural, and it's only when they really started to try and expand into the suburbs that everyone went, what, the frack. So, and then the second thing I wanted to say was that just made me think. I mean, I did do an interview with the Energy Minister, Anthony Roberts, at one point, and had a conversation with him. And I mean, I don't think we can say that there's a free-for-all regulatory regime here in the sense that the industry has stopped dead for the last 3 years, because we have got the 2K buffer zones, and we have got staunch community opposition. I think that's really that was a legacy of the federal election in 20. Now, when was it? It was in the lead up to 20.
Yeah, it was in the lead up to 2013.
When he announced
March.
the
March 2013.
Yeah, where obviously O'Farrell realised that he wasn't doing Tony Abbott any favours if he allowed any fracking in the western suburbs. So the industry would complain bitterly about the regulatory regime here, and I mean, my book basically called for a pause button and a real assessment of the groundwater impacts and other things, and we have had a pause in this state, to give everyone their credit. And what was interesting to me when I spoke to Roberts was because the industry argues New South Wales has to get moving because we've got a gas supply shortage, and if we don't do that, our gas prices are going to rise. And it's a rubbish argument on about 3 different levels. And one, it's an argument because more supply is not going to change the equation because the buyer, is offshore, and that market is so much bigger than we will. The consumers in New South Wales don't make a difference to the price. The price has changed once and for all. But also, secondly, we actually have plenty of gas, and what really struck me was that Exxon and BHP, who are joint venturers in Bass Strait, are not obliged to report to the public or to tell the public how much gas they're sitting on. Not only that, all these companies with their reserves, that are estimated, in the wholesale market, they don't have to tell you what price they're getting for their gas. And so they are forcing a situation on the public where we're making decisions about where we have gas development and where we don't. But the market is not transparent at all. And I was very impressed with Anthony Roberts that it's Anthony, isn't it? Yeah, that he understood this and didn't like being bullied by the industry either, and told that you have to approve coal seam gas in your state or else the price is going to go up. And they were really, the industry was really trying to hold the government, put the government up against the wall. And the inevitable answer, as Jeremy has championed, is reservation. Just bugger it, we'll do exactly what the Western Australian government did, which is we'll say from now on 15% of gas or whatever percent we decide is going to be supplied for the domestic market, and there goes your price pressure, and they are terrified of that, and yet it is such an obvious solution. The US itself has a strict control on exports because it wants to make sure that it retains cheap energy for its own manufacturers and industry and consumers. So why don't we do the same thing? The fact is it's a very logical policy that the industry is very concerned about, and I think to the credit, the government, so far at least, hasn't been bullied by the industry.
Here. Chandru, that's my name. My question regards to coal seam gas and shale gas. Now, in US, the gas extraction is, I believe, shale gas, and in Australia, it is CSG. Now, I've read in the internet that it is the extraction process of shale gas that is extremely damaging to the underground water network or the aquifers. Whereas the CSG, which is at much shorter depth, is not that dangerous. It is dangerous, but not that dangerous. So my question is there some truth in those articles that one's can find many in the internet, that shale gas is immensely more dangerous to aquifers than coal seam gas? Or is it just one of those misleading things you read in the internet?
I think it's one of those misleading things you read in the internet, because the shale gas is typically a lot deeper, like 1,500 metres to 2, 3, 4, 5 kilometres deep. So it's there's a lot of other geological strata above the shale, between. There's aquifers all the way down through the geology, but the beneficial aquifers, and it's all about human interest, I suppose, is the beneficial aquifers and the ones that are we're more likely to come into contact with and all the rest are higher up. They're closer to the surface. So it's actually in America they call it CBM and tight sands that are more likely to have the fracking of them is to cause that interconnectivity. I mean, in Australia, coal seams themselves are an aquifer. They're a conduit for water. They're porous. There's a lot of saline water that moves through them very slowly. The fact that when they frack these coal seams, they have to pull the water out of them. That's the whole process. They have to depressurise them by pulling the water out, and the gas comes out with the water, and then the methane molecules unhook themselves from the coal. That's a chemistry term, that one. And then they flow. So it's actually CBM, and in the United States there's a mix. There's a lot of shale in the south of the United States, the central south, but in areas around Wyoming, it's coal bed methane. It's very similar geology. They have large open cut mines because the coal is close to the surface, so it's very easy for them. And a lot of underground mines, Pennsylvania, those places, a lot of coal. They've got shale with coal on top. It's all mixed up. This is the thing. No two places are the same. And they can have completely distinct geology and water and all the rest in relatively close proximity. So it is a bit of an experiment, and
Thank you.
All right, one more question.
My name is Ken Cregan. It's interesting you talked about the value of the gas, but it also needs to be talked about the value of water, because it can be argued that in the considerably long term that water will become our most valuable resource and far more valuable than gas. So it would be a compelling argument against fracking to show an analysis of the value of water in the long term versus the value of the gas, especially with and without fracking, because fracking makes the water more scarce and more valuable. So do you have any comments on that, and has there been some analysis and some projections into the long term, like 25 years, for these values?
Well, I haven't seen actual pricing, if it's $1 million per megalitre or whatever, versus, and that would be very interesting. That's a great suggestion, but no, I've certainly never seen it. But definitely, if I had the book handy, I would just read a little great one of my favourite quotes of all time. So, it's just at the back. Thank you, man. It's about basically, and Bill Heffernan, to his God love him, is right onto this. Is about the food task versus the energy task.
The food task.
But it's true though. The food's, and maybe if you just, I'll just find this quote. It's a great quote.
You find Bill. The interest. It is a very, very good question, because tonight we focused a lot on water quality. They're going to put chemicals in the water, and where's that going to end up, and will it make my hair fall out even more, blah, 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 all the rest of it, will it kill us, what's the long-term impacts, all the rest. But in Australia, groundwater is enormously important and not well understood. But we do know that this industry will require billions, gigalitres of water. Recently we had the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. You'd all remember that there was a lot of, there was a rancorous argument about that, with how much water we could extract. That was about, like most people sort of thought about it in terms of surface water, but groundwater was being considered as well, about the sustainable diversion limits, SDLs for groundwater and surface water. Now we wound back the sustainable diversion limits. So we lowered the cap on the amount of water we could pull out of the surface system a little bit. We would have gone further. The gnats and some of the irrigators wouldn't have gone that far. But the one area where we created massive new allocations for groundwater in Australia, in the Murray-Darling Basin, was in the Surat, Bowen and Namoy valleys. The areas where the big gas extraction was occurring had huge new allocations, while we were decreasing by about 2,000 gigalitres the amount of water we could extract. But it was the gas miners, and if they were to pay a fair value for that water, that would be a really interesting question about whether or not they could be sustainable, because they need to use billions of litres per annum, and the Murray-Darling Basin Plan facilitated that.
Oh yeah, I just found my little passage. It's by Julian Cribb from ex-CSIRO, who wrote the book called The Coming Famine, and he frames the challenge for the coming generation of farmers this way. Over the next 50 years, they must double food supply, using half the water on less land and with increasingly depleted soils, without fossil fuels, with increasingly scarce fertilisers and chemicals, amid spreading disease and pests, and under the hammer of climate change.
guys in the rest of the manufacturing sector. We're averaging up to $2 per gigajoule. We're at $4 to $8 because we're supplying the Japanese market.
Yes.
China's buying it at 12, Japan is 16, and India's $12 per gigajoule.
Yes.
And as we start to take away more money and energy out of the sector, we actually increase, like I said, on par parity with export prices.
Yeah.
So putting into that perspective, start realising where the direction,
Where the dollar's going to go, where our manufacturing's going to go.
Thanks for a great talk, though.
Thank you. What's your name?
Nick Marinos, pleasure.
Thank you.
Nick, what would you have to say about the Trans-Pacific Partnership
Fantastic.
Agreement?
Thank you.
I don't want to be on TV saying on the camera.
Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, you do have some things to say?
Yes.
Yeah, off the record?
Yeah, off the record.
Well, probably in one word, beware, or something like that?
Yes, beware. Probably, yeah, without some other superlatives.
Oh, okay. When do you think we'll be able to hear some more about that?
A lot is still being decided at the moment.
Did you see the WikiLeaks document?
I haven't seen WikiLeaks at the moment, no.
There was a part of the TPP that was leaked.
There are a number of different sources, but it's still sort of mentioned through a backdoor deals that it's still not made public.
Yes.
And the sad thing is, by not allowing it to go public,
Yeah.
it's actually allowing certain terms to be pushed in that if they were to be exposed in public,
Yeah.
will actually be refused or even viewed as being crazy or not with its the paper it's written on. And it's actually being pushed by a very select few, often outside of our domain. Whereas if they were to be exposed, for example, directly or named, you'll actually find that they're the ones actually back off first rather than anyone else. But by being secret, they can actually be a lot more sort of appear to be a lot bigger than what they actually are.
Oh, okay.
But take it off the camera, so I don't want to sort of be.
Great. Thank you very much. That's interesting.